We're going to get started because we only have an hour in this room, and I think that probably started about 2:35, so we have to move and get started. We're going to ask Representative Nix to open our time today with prayer, please, if everybody would give him your attention. Wait a minute. What number is it? 84. I don't know, mash your button.
There it is.
Did that get it?
There we go. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the blessings you give to us. As you grant us grace and mercy, may we do that to those that will come before us today, that we make the decisions that would make you proud of us, Lord, that we might do the right thing for the children in this state. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you. We're going to begin with Representative Houston's bill, which is HB 844.
Thank you, Representative Chandler. And I have a handout for the board, the committee members, if y'all want to get it afterwards, that sort of explains more about the bill that I think y'all might be interested in. And this, so thank you. This is an exciting day for me because this is something that's been worked on with a lot of people and a lot of hard work for a long time. And I am just sort of, as you'd call, the pigeon, because I wasn't on the committee, but I was real close to a lot of people that were on there. But as you probably know, that children who are deaf and hard of hearing in the state are in a crisis, because only 3% of the children who are in special education because of their defect or their ability not to hear or hard of hearing are reading on grade level in the 3rd grade. And we all know that all children can learn to read. And it's like it was brought out to us yesterday in the House, all Georgia children are our children, and it's our responsibility to look after all children. And before Commissioner Fitzgerald left, she worked on a committee to bring literacy from children from birth. And it was called Birth to Literacy Plan for Every Child. And this is part of the Birth to Literacy Plan for Every Child. And you'll notice throughout the bill, one of the first changes that you'll notice, we have changed the bill out from hearing impaired persons to deaf and hard of hearing persons. And that's a change you'll see throughout the bill. If you'll turn to the bill, this bill is related to the Georgia Commission on Hearing Impaired and Deaf, and there's certain provisions that were in that. And Section 1 is definitions, and explains several definitions throughout the bill. So if you look at Section 1, I won't go over these definitions because since this is the education bill, I know y'all can all read, so I won't go over them unless you'd like for me to. But this goes over all the definitions. And it even explains a new definition that I had never heard of, was the Individualized Family Service Plan. And I thought that was a very interesting, it's a plan for special services for young children from birth to 3 with developmental delays. And you probably know that in 1999, Georgia started testing children for hearing defects at birth. And we tested them, but we really didn't have a plan. And so when they got to public school, it was got in pre-K, they were sort of left behind. And so this is to get them on speed so they'll be ready to when they hit public education. And you'll go down on page 2. We're creating the Georgia Commission for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. That's changing the name. And it's on line 58 on page 2. And they're changing the number of people on the commission from 12 members, and this just from 58 all the way through. It tells you who these people will be on the commission. And if you have any questions, I don't mind you stopping me. This tells, starting on 89, this tells what the commission shall do, and you'll see again where we change the wording. And some of it from here on, from 89 on, is just about the same thing. We just changed the wording from to deaf and hard of hearing persons. It's the same, nothing was changed. Then it starts to tell what the commission will do. And the commission is going to have a task force. And it tells about the task force on line 138. And who's on the task force. And the task force is to try to bring everybody together, and Public Health, Department of Early Learning, and Department of Education, so we can all work together and not work in silos to get these children ready to meet the deadline, so they'll be ready to learn to read. And also, too, you know, it will change their lives. We have so many people in rural areas that don't have access to a lot of things, and we hope that by tracking these children and establishing this program, that every child in Georgia will learn to read and learn to be a productive citizen and a happy person. And this task force, it tells about how many people will be on the task force, and that's on page 5. That describes the task force. Then she told me to go fast, so I'm going fast. So, all right. And it tells about the chairman organizing the meal, and then the meeting, not the meal, the meeting. And it goes on and about who will be on there. We're going to have teachers from both American Sign Language and spoken English language, and people from the spoken English community and the sign community have worked so well together to get this bill done. And then one change that we have made, they will be, it's on page, this is on page 244. The Georgia Technology Authority will be working with public health, early childhood and learning, and education to establish the program to monitor these kids. And in order to identify them, they are going to have a number. The name won't be there. They'll have a number so these children can be tracked. But all of this has to meet the regulations, federal regulations. And I think you'll see on page 269, it must comply with the Health Insurance Portable Accountability Act, the Family Education Rights Privacy Act, and any other federal. In fact, I don't know what IDEA, maybe somebody from the Department of Education could help me on that. I don't know what that stands for. All these acronyms. Anybody know? Okay. All right, thank you. But everything has to conform with federal law. And I'll be glad to take any questions, but before I do, I want to thank a lot of people who have worked so hard on this. And first of all, from Legislative Council, Laura Brittle has just gone out of her way to help us, and I do appreciate it. And Comer Yates, and also Dr. Kenny Moore, and then I think from the Department of early learning. We've had people from all over, and you'll notice in the handout I'm giving you on page 2, and it's too many people just to really call their names out. And if I forgot y'all's name, I didn't mean to. They put me on a time limit. All these people have helped. And we hope that it's our desire that this will work out and make every child in Georgia a reader by the time they're in the 3rd grade. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee? Thank you for bringing this to us. And I believe we have some people to speak to this bill. And so some of you write as illegibly as I do. So please excuse me when I crucify your names. Mr. Yates. And I'm going to ask you to please keep your comments to about a minute or so. And I hate to rush everybody, but you know we're behind. So once we get behind down here, we're behind.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm here as the chair of the Georgia Commission on Hearing Impaired Deaf Persons appointed by Governor Deal. I'm here because in gratitude to Representative Houston, who is a champion for our children who are deaf or hard of hearing and all our children. I'm here with my colleagues who represent every corner of the world of people who support children who are deaf and hard of hearing. The reason we're really here is because of Governor Deal's singular commitment and unconditional commitment of our state that every one of our children should have the right to read, the right to decide his or her own future and make the greatest difference possible in other people's lives. And we heard from Representative Houston, only 3% of our children who are deaf or hard of hearing in special ed can read. So we are here. Deputy Superintendent McGivney is here, and he said around Governor Deal's promise, too many people refer to that promise as a goal. And Dr. McGivney's words, it's a commitment. And this bill represents a commitment by people you're seeing there with hundreds of years of commitment and engagement and expertise with children who are deaf. Their life's work has been brought to life by this bill. And this bill is formed as a result of Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, when she was our commissioner for the Department of Public Health, recognizing that this lack of access to literacy for children who are deaf or hard of hearing was a public health imperative. And the only way to break this epidemic and end it was to have a system that relied upon interagency cooperation between the Department of Public Health, DECAL, and the Department of Education. And she discovered and sought the leading brain scientists in the country to know how these three organizations could work together in order for this reading brain construction for all of our children. So I'll end there because there are others to speak, but I just want you to understand for us, as Governor Deal's in his last year of office, this is a chance nationally for Georgia to say, for our most, when we say all children, it starts with our most vulnerable children who've lacked access to literacy for centuries, actually, if you look at it. And finally, I want you to understand nationally, there are people all over the country watching. There was a photograph made of this group earlier today. It will be all over the internet tonight because other states where people who have worked to provide children with language through listened and spoken language or American Sign Language we have too often focused on language and not enough on literacy. And Dr. Fitzgerald told us language is language is language to chart a course for a child's life. And this group of extraordinary people who've come together to say enough's enough, it's all time for us to work together, have set a national standard. Thanks to Governor Deal, thanks to Commissioner Fitzgerald, thanks to Representative Houston's leadership, and thanks to my colleague and dear friend Kenny Moore, from whom we're going to hear next. And I'm sorry that went over a minute. I couldn't contain myself. No, I tried.
Thank you for sharing. And now Mr. Moore.
So I'll give up some of my time that Comer was able to use, so that's okay to keep you on schedule. Again, I'm Kenny Moore. I'm our state schools director, so I get the privilege of leading our 3 state schools for students that are deaf and blind as one of our early intervention programs, also Georgia Pines. And so we serve children throughout the state that have sensory impairments. And the beauty of the work that we have in front of us is unlike any other that's happening in our country. We've had these two sides come together folks that really strongly believe in listening and spoken language for children, folks that believe that American Sign Language is the right way to go, that never really talked to each other before this process started. So we started about 2010. So we feel like we've worked on this for a very long time. At this point, we all know what the solutions are, and the solutions are what you see in this legislation that Representative Houston has brought before you today. One of the assurances that I want to give you as a public educator of 25 years, I went into this really wanting to uphold that whatever we did as a group here, that we were not diminishing the rights of students as part of IDEA, that's their federal protections. And if anything, this bill really supports that language. We don't want to cause extra burden on local school systems because there are some assessment requirements that are in here. But if we don't gauge how well those students are doing that are deaf or have a hearing loss on a regular basis, there's no way that we can move them forward. So you'll see in the bill formative assessments, which we all know are very important. So we believe if this gets passed, that it literally can change the lives of these kids. Not only that they'll be on a trajectory for reading by 3rd grade, so that they'll be contributing citizens in the state of Georgia. So thank you.
And thank you, sir. Next, we have John. And John, you're going to have to help me with your last name. Serrano. Okay. Thank you. Serrano. Thank you. You're on.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members.
You know what? We're going to need him at the mic.
Is there a button that you can press to? It's right here.
What number is that, though? I don't know what. Is there a number
Is
in?
that where it's right here?
Oh, right over there.
They weren't working. They haven't been working.
Would you just speak loud?
Stand up. Again, my name is John Serrano, and I'm the school level superintendent for the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. We serve deaf students and hard of hearing students in the Atlanta metro area. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Georgia Pathways Group, where we work very hard to make sure that deaf and hard of hearing students in the state of Georgia are able to read. We believe this will empower a statewide system that will give support for families that have deaf and hard of hearing children. And it also encourages language acquisition at an early age. And also, it will create a way where there's all language options are available, and then we can establish language for families that have deaf and hard of hearing children. It also develop a literacy plan to help families understand and keep track of their children's progress linguistically through milestones that are established. After all, parent engagement is very important. That is an indicator of childhood and the children's success. This is also related to my personal experience as a deaf man. I was fortunate to have parents that were very involved. They clawed and scratched their way, working through the system to get the support that I needed so that my language would develop at an early age. Now, my mother represented, she knew that it was very important to give the access to language very early, but that path was not very easy. And it shouldn't be that way for other families who have deaf and hard of hearing children today. This bill offers a unique opportunity to create a plan and model to help empower families to cultivate and support language at an early stage of their children's lives. Thank you for your time and your consideration of this important bill for deaf and hard of hearing children in the state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you. And would you say thank you to him for me? We appreciate it. Next, we have Stacy. Stacy? We're going to skip that? Okay. Stacy? Okay. Debbie? Brilliant.
Hi, I'm Debbie Brilling. I'm a mom of 2 profoundly deaf children, also the executive director of the Auditory Verbal Center, an early intervention and family education program for the deaf and hard of hearing in listening and spoken language. We've worked really hard on this bill for a year and a half to make sure, one, that there's parents' choice within this bill, which this bill covers parents' choice on whatever mode of communication that family chooses. It also allows for tracking children. There's a lot of successful kids in our public school system who are deaf and hard of hearing reading at 3rd grade reading level, but we can't track them. We don't know where they're at. And we need to be able to track them so we can maybe learn from the model that they went through so all our kids can read at 3rd grade reading level who are deaf and hard of hearing. So I really support all our efforts in what we've done in this bill because it really will help guarantee that these deaf and hard of hearing kids throughout the state of Georgia are able to read by 3rd grade.
Thank you very much. And next we have, let's see, Laura? We're going to skip that too. Well, if you have something to add that has not been said, we want to hear from you, so I don't want to cut you out. But are we okay?
I think if y'all have questions for us,
Yes.
then we could answer those would probably be best.
And I imagine if we had questions, we would have already heard from the folks up here. But if I've missed anybody and who has a question, let me know. I think you were so well spoken that you covered everything. Thank you. And
I think the big thing, if I can say, is that this is the full range of people supporting children who are deaf or hard of hearing collected together. That's the main thing we want y'all to know. Is that everybody? I have a motion.
thank you for being here. And Chairman Coleman.
I have a motion. I motion do pass.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign. Thank you.
It'll be on the agenda tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Be heard tomorrow at 2 o'clock in full committee. Right.
Thank y'all for being here.
Good job, Penny.
And next we have Representative Kendricks, who's here somewhere, who is presenting House Resolution 1036.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm bringing for you House Resolution 1036, and this is an urging resolution urging the state of Georgia to fund a public awareness campaign in support of computer science education. We know that there are thousands of jobs that are being unfulfilled in the STEAM-related field, so we want to encourage the state to fund public awareness campaigns for children and students and parents and people who are in that industry to help drive some students towards that
Representative, excuse me, you might want to wait just a few seconds so until all this noise kind of clears out. Thank you, Representative.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if you want me to go back over all of it, but it's just an urging resolution urging the state of Georgia to fund a public awareness campaign in support of computer science education. And I've been lucky enough to work with Mr. Gary McGivney on this and some other people who are highly interested in tech and tech education, but we know that students lose their passion for STEAM-related fields at an early age, and we have so many jobs that are available. So this is encouraging the state of Georgia to really put forth a comprehensive marketing campaign to students and parents and people who are involved in tech to encourage more students to go into those fields.
Any questions for the author?
If I could, I'd just like to ask the State Department, do they have, Gary McGivney, are y'all fine with this? Yes, I knew you did, so she's worked hard with you, so very good. So you see no problems with. How about cost?
There's no cost other than what we plan to get together already with a marketing plan and also with a professional learning plan. So there's no additional cost.
Very good. Thank you, okay?
Thank you. Any other questions? We have several people to speak to this bill too. We have Tim Carroll from the Metro Atlanta Chamber.
Smart move.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Next, we have Erica Moore.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Erica Moore. I'm a mother of two sons, two teenage sons, 15 and 13. I also serve as the executive director for the Technology Association of Georgia Education Collaborative. So in addition to just being in support of this resolution, just wanted to make sure that in terms of facts and the opportunities, right, as Representative Kendrick mentioned, there are thousands of opportunities that exist, and we are not funneling the pipeline to ensure that that talent is being built in and succeeding in closing the gap. So for example, just in 2015, from numbers in 2015, there was over 6,000 job opportunities that existed, and even from a graduate school level, there were only about 2,000 students being produced. At the associate degree level, a little over 1,000 students being produced. So again, there's a gap that exists, and opportunities like this help to ensure that parents can be so much more informed around the opportunities that exist, that counselors and educational administrators can be so much more informed about the opportunities that exist. The disparities that exist, particularly in rural areas and for underrepresented students, it's still very great, right? And particularly in a state where barely 20% of our high schools actually have computer science AP classes available, it makes an impact. And just to give you some perspective, I used to be a part of a nonprofit organization that supported technology executives, and the global CIO for Procter & Gamble, she indicated that they may be a consumer product good company, but they're a technology company. So point being, technology is the basis for so many career choices, and passing something like this would make a huge difference in the opportunities that can exist and the awareness that goes along with that. So I appreciate your time.
Any questions? Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
And is there any further discussion to come from the committee? Do I have a motion? So move. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. And like sign. Anybody oppose? Thank you very much. And in full committee. Thank you, and thank you to all of those of you who have been here in support of these pieces of legislation.
Testing.
Got it. Got it. Get the glasses out. We got. They leaving that door open back there? Oh, okay, good. She's shutting it. Perfect. Good for her. Yeah. Okay, the hour having arrived, I call this meeting of Banks and Banking to order and would ask Reverend Nix if he would to open this up with a word of prayer. Well, I'm going to click on it, and that should be it. Oh, so that's the, okay, I see.
That's me.
Go ahead.
Let's pray. Father, again, we come to you and we thank you for your blessings you give to us. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to serve, and just pray that you would bless us as we deliberate over these measures. Lord, that the things that we do would be pleasing for you and be best for the people in our state. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, preacher. Okay, let's see, where's our bill? Where's Paul Redstone? This is at 676. Is that Redstone? Is that the? Okay, the first bill we're going to be taking up, and this is, we are going to have a vote on this measure, the substitute to House Bill 676. Make sure everybody's looking at LC 440806S. I believe that's the correct LC number, so make sure we're on the right track. Now, the way we do this, again, Ms. Rakestraw, Representative Rakestraw will again briefly go over the bill and explain the substitute to the committee. The committee can ask questions of Ms. Rakestraw for whatever questions they have, as long as we need to. We won't be having testimony from anyone else, non-committee member, on that. So at this time, I will have Representative Rakestraw present the substitute to House Bill 676 to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So this is House Bill 676, and it is to, it was originally intended to model Florida law, but we've made some changes to be more consistent with the Federal Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act. But what we have done is we have included the National Guard in ours, and it's for active duty military personnel ordered on federal duty for more than 30 days. If they are in a foreclosure process, then they have up to a year to resolve that foreclosure process, which is consistent with federal law. But what the difference is, it gives a judge more latitude to develop a remedy to resolve the case rather than simply stay in the case and putting it on hold, which is what the federal law does. And in ours, it includes the National Guard service members. Oh, and helps us with the BRAC closures. Did I mention that? That's what drove this bill, was to help us when we go through the process of BRAC closures.
Okay, all right, good. How do I get rid of that? What's that? I'm trying to figure out.
Click what? You trying to click on this one?
Yeah. Okay, I believe is that Representative Mitchell, did you have a question?
I did not. As a matter of fact, I had a comment, if I can, Mr. Chairman. I do believe that this legislation intent is good legislation, and if it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion to pass this legislation. Be quite candid with you, I think these kind of protections should probably be broadened to all consumers in Georgia, just not those in the military, but I think this is great legislation and would offer a motion to do pass this time.
Wouldn't be quite ready just yet for a motion. Let's see. Is that you, Representative Morris? Okay, Representative Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious if there's a difference between planned and unplanned federal orders, meaning if there's a difference of being activated when a service member is aware that it's coming months, months out. There are those cases, as opposed to one that all of a sudden finds out that in 3 weeks he or she that their unit is being activated, that they had no prior knowledge of it under that. So have we taken those considerations into play, a planned activation versus an unplanned activation?
Are you talking about of service or activation of, I guess I'm not understanding your question.
Okay, so it looks like if they've been ordered to federal status under Title 10, okay? So if they knew 6 months ago that they were going, at a certain point, that they were going on active duty in more than 30 days under Title 10, as opposed to all of a sudden there being a national emergency, where, I always think back there were a lot of folks, I'm glad to see you do this, because there were a lot of folks affected in Gulf War I that all of a sudden went from 0 to, 80 in almost no time, and I know that the medical community took a big hit here. They did not see that coming at all, versus someone that knows that, hey, next June, I'm going to be activated for some period of time.
It doesn't really address that. It just says they have to be on active duty for 30 days or longer to qualify, which again is in the federal law. So we're mirroring the federal law. We just expanded to include the National Guard and made it to where the judge can develop a remedy to resolve the case rather than just stay the case. So it really doesn't address like notice and how long they knew they were going to be serving, and just they have to be serving for 30 days or longer.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. Are there any other questions for Representative Rakestraw from the committee? Looks like there is. Okay. Representative Elam, you have a question?
Can you draw a parallel for us between the Federal Soldiers and Sailors Act and what we're trying to do here? I'm not sure I understand the direct parallel, and we seem to be quoting that a lot.
Well, so we originally modeled the bill after the Florida law, and then when we looked at the Federal Soldiers and Sailors Act and talked with the people from banking, they wanted to mirror that. So we changed, the bill to more closely mirror that, which, was putting in the year provision, and I don't remember exactly what all we changed, but they expressed that they wanted it to mirror the federal law so that they have one set of rules to conform to, and not, 10 million based on the other states that have changes to the bill. And so we changed it based on that code to be consistent with that. The only difference is it gives a judge more latitude to develop a remedy instead of just doing a stay on a foreclosure, and it gives this to the National Guard as well if they're on active duty. It extends this coverage to the National Guard. So that's the only difference between this and federal law, which we're already following, but it helps us when we go through BRAC closures. This was like the #1 thing on the list that they wanted to see, that we are friendly to military families. This was the #1 thing that they wanted on the list of things when they went through the BRAC committee to help prevent us from having our bases closed when they go through that process.
May I follow?
Yes.
Real property is basically a state, is under the state purview. And I'm just trying to figure out when you're applying the federal law and how that is going to be a direct parallel to our states and our banks in Georgia that have a note against a house. And to give an example, if the person is deployed and they've stopped paying for some reason, I think we gave an example like if a spouse was back home and the service member they were sending the money to the spouse, and the spouse didn't pay. And I have personal experience with that when I was on active duty. But when the person came back, then obviously they could start paying the payments. So my concern is, by passing this, are we going to say that the military person is overseas, their spouse hasn't paid, they come back, they find out that spouse hasn't paid, they're in foreclosure. Are they going to be able to continue this for another 12 months? So in other words, instead of being like 3 months behind or 4 months behind, then they can get to be 15, 16 months behind. If that's what we were doing, it seemed like we're coddling them beyond what I think would be healthy. But
well, again, it's already in federal law, so they're currently able to do that. They're currently able to live in the property up to a year to get it resolved, because they could come back after, say, 6 months of duty and find out if the mortgage hasn't been paid. They have an opportunity to work out a payment plan to get that caught up. They have up to a year, so that the property wasn't closed on in 60 or 90 days or whatever that process currently takes. It just extends the amount of time they have to work out a payment plan or some kind of solution.
Further question?
Yes.
I have no problem if they are working out a plan to pay these back payments. My question is, are they, under this law, if we pass it, are they going to be able to continue to not pay?
Not only up to a year. I mean, in the worst case scenario, the house would be foreclosed on, and that would hit their credit, and they wouldn't be able to buy another home if their credit's ruined because they didn't pay their mortgage. So
it's still not clear to me.
And mortgages are typically handled federally. I mean, we have, a few banks in our state, but most of them are governed by federal law because, they exist in other states. They may have a nexus here or may not, but they're still, providing mortgages to the citizens of Georgia regardless of where they do business out of.
Is the gentleman finished? All right, now this sounds ominous. It sounds, so hold on if it blows. But Representative Ridley, you have a question?
Okay, you said that the reason you're doing this bill is to include National Guardsmen?
It does include National Guard, yes.
So the federal law already includes National Guard?
No, the federal law does not include National Guard. We have expanded it to include the National Guard.
Well, actually, under Chapter 10 of USC 124006, it does include National Guardsmen that are sent by federal law or president. Also includes volunteers of National Guardsmen.
Wait, are you talking about the federal?
Yes, the federal.
Okay. Well,
the federal
according to
bill already
Legislative
includes.
Council, it does not currently include the National Guard. I got this from them.
From what now?
Legislative Council told me that the federal law does not include the National Guard, and we asked them to keep the National Guard in ours.
Well, under this right here, it says that they are. The National Guard is included. Volunteers, those have been activated involuntarily, inductees, the federal SCRA does not apply to those reservists or National Guard components that are not active.
I have a copy of it right here, actually. Where is that stated?
Right. From the state, it wouldn't be protected.
Okay. Well, I have a copy of it here,
Hold
and
on,
it doesn't talk
whatever
about
you're
it.
doing was helping. Just let's regather our thoughts here. Okay, we'll get confused if we're not. Let's keep our order, and the way we need to do this is again, Representative Ridley, do you have another clarifying question?
I was just wondering, because under Title 10, 12406, it says that that National Guard are covered whenever they're called up federally. So are you saying that this bill will, if the state calls them up, they'll also fall under this?
So I was told by legislative council, and I have a copy here, but I'm not sure if this is the federal or if this is the Florida. It may be Florida. But I was told by legislative council that the federal law does not include the National Guard, but ours does. So we kept that in. When we went through changes with the banking people, we kept that in.
Okay, and I guess my
So-
next question would be, if they're not, does the state have the authority to do this and make the banks follow along with it just because our state says, well, our National Guardsmen, if they're on call, then you can't foreclose on them? If we do pass this, does our state have that authority to do that?
Well, that's sticky and tricky because a lot of it is governed federally, but I do believe that they try to comply with state law when
Okay.
they do business, so.
Okay.
I don't know what kind of legal standing that has, but I think that they try to, in good faith, follow our state policies in regards to mortgages.
Chairman, I'm done.
Okay, all right. Okay, I believe next we had Ms. Fraser, was that your button? I can't see over this.
Yes, sir.
Well, you should have your microphone. Check it out.
Thank you.
Okay.
Representative Rayshaw, thank you so much for this legislation. We have vetted this in committee, and we actually asked you to do some of these things, and I appreciate it. But in this legislation, simply just allowing our military members that are deployed, that to some unforeseen consequence of that they do not know, being serving their country, that things happen here. And so for instance, in the case of a foreclosure, that they did not know that payments were not being made back home, for example, that they will have the time, longer than 30 days, in order to come back and to try to clear that up. That's basically what we're trying to do, is give them time. Yes. Longer than 30 days. You can't do anything in 30 days, even in CONUS. So to give them that ample time to come home and not have to lose their homes or gain bad credit due to this.
Yes.
So thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Mitchell, did you have another question?
Yes, to lay some of the fears and being very familiar with this, having passed legislation dealing with foreclosures in this state. Once again, I applaud the author. We're talking about courts of competent jurisdiction, which means that we're only talking about mortgage that originate here in the state of Georgia. We're also talking about it is the opinion of the court, and that's one of the great things that I like about this, is that it gives the court the flexibility to get into the issues to allay some of your fears. If they feel that the serviceman or woman, in fact, could not meet their obligations, then the court can rule so. So once again, Mr. Chairman, I think this is great legislation. I'm here to offer my motion to do pass.
Representative Elam, you had another question. Microphone, do you have a question for the, I'm giving you your opportunity to ask a question if you want to try to clear it up again. Wait,
They have to be on
off.
active duty for at least 30 days to qualify. And then they have up to a year to remedy the situation if they get behind on their mortgage payments.
After they return.
Yes.
I don't see any more questions being requested.
Actually,
Are there any?
Let me clarify that. I'm not sure if it's after they return or 30 or a year, up to a year. Hold on. Let me look at that. It's actually up to a year that they've become delinquent, not after they return. So if they're gone 6 months and they're 6 months behind, then they have 6 more months to remedy.
Chairman Nix, did you have a question? Or?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's enough confusion on this. I'd like to move to table this until we can get it worked out.
All right, I'll recognize that motion. There's a motion to table the committee substitute to House Bill.
So can I ask what
676.
confusion we need to clear up if we're going to table it?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Not at this point. That's what we've already went through. Chairman Nix has made a motion to table the committee substitute to House Bill 676. It has a second. Is there further discussion by the members of the committee on the motion? I hear none. All those in favor of the motion to table the House substitute to 676 would signify by saying aye. Those opposed? All right, let's have a show of hands. All right. Those in favor of tabling House substitute 676 would please raise their hand. Those opposed to the motion to table, please raise your hand. The motion to table carries. Now I'll say this, we are in a posture, it may be a good time to mention that the author of House Bill 902, we planned on having a hearing for House Bill 902. That's not going to be held today by request of the author of the bill. We will be having, hopefully, I believe at 2 o'clock tomorrow, go ahead and say that we're going to have reschedule that hearing for House Bill 902. At that point, we may very well give this another shot. So if there are any questions of the author or anybody involved between now and 2 o'clock tomorrow, would be a good time for those discussions to be held.
So can we go over what's unclear? Because
not at this point. What we
models federal law, so I don't.
I understand.
I don't know what the
what we've got
confusion
is a motion to table, and it's been seconded and voted on. So there's no further discussion at this point. What I'm informing the committee is at 2 o'clock tomorrow, when there is a hearing on 902, that we can have that discussion again. Or we can, I'll let the committee know what action on House Bill 7, committee substitute House Bill 676 will be, but there very well may be another opportunity to vote tomorrow. So if you got questions about this bill, you need to get with the author.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if y'all would let me know what the questions are that are unclear, because
the author can get with the members of the committee.
Okay.
To discuss those. Okay? Thank you, Representative Rakestraw.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah, there you go. Somebody makes it me more tense. Okay. If I get my glasses on, I can read it. Okay, at this point, we have heard a testimony and had a hearing on House Bill 866. There's no substitute to this bill. We're talking about the same bill, but yet we'll have the same rules apply. We're going to have a vote on House Bill 866. The author will briefly again explain the content of the bill to the committee, and the committee can ask any questions of the author at that point. So, Representative Turner, proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 866. It's LC number 5930, which is a bill that would eliminate credit freezes and thaws in reaction to the major data breach that put nearly every adult American in jeopardy for potential identity theft. So we are trying to arm our average Georgia consumer with a tool to help them protect their identity. And that's what the aim, and that's simply what this bill does, is eliminates that $3 per transaction fee with all three agencies.
That was concise. Is there, let's see, I believe we've got a question from, let's see, Representative Cox has a question for the author.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my friend in the kind of thing, well thing up there, isn't it true that, you know, I had concerns in the original meeting about the revenue that we may be cutting out to our agencies and the fees associated with that sort of going away or being reduced. But since then, I have been able to speak with people in the industry, and it seems to me, if you could confirm this, that we're sort of moving in that direction anyway with these agencies. Apps are being developed. The competitive sort of juices in the industry are driving these three agencies to offering these things for free anyway, making it easier to do, freeze and unfreeze, and that's kind of the direction we're going in. And isn't it further true that I now support this bill, look forward to voting for it?
Gentleman knows of which he speaks.
Okay. Representative Morris.
Is it true that one of the three largest credit bureaus had a massive data breach this past year?
It's absolutely true. 140 million plus Americans infected by that.
Is it also true that many people found themselves in the position of having to go through freezes to protect themselves against identity theft?
Yes, sir.
Is it also true that this bill would prevent those same consumers and their spouses from having to pay to unlock their credit because they locked it up due to data breaches every time they want to buy a house or buy a car or even get a power bill?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Mitchell.
Again, Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much. A very fine piece of legislation. I just want to ask the author, is it not true that these consumer agencies derive much income from the compiling of our personal credit history?
That is their business model.
Right. So at the very least, we should be, as consumers, if we wish to not be in the position that Representative Morris mentioned, we should be able to lock it and unlock them as well. They still will be able to gain their income from compiling our credit histories.
Yes, sir. They'll also be able to continue to earn income through the subscription services that they sell for their access to that data through retailers and other means of what they do today. They're just not going to be able to charge you as an individual consumer for the ability to protect your identity.
Thank you for looking out for consumers.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Frazier, you had a question?
No, ma'am. You would pay $3 when you freeze the credit with that agency. And so there are three agencies. It'd be $9 to freeze your credit across the three. If you wanted to unfreeze or thaw your credit, you would pay another $3 at that transaction. So you're looking at another $9. It would be $18 to go through one cycle of freezing and thawing your credit with all three agencies.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, sir. That's a great point.
Well, that was just a comment from the, we'll, if there's a, is there any statement that you want to make based on what was just said?
The gentleman indicated that if you had two adults in a household, that would be $36 for that cycle.
Okay. Any further questions? Any further discussion? Well, if there's a motion to be had, now would be a time to make it. Got a move to pass. We'll have a second. We have a move to pass and we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Bill
sir.
is
Thank you,
passed,
members of
and
the committee. I appreciate you.
we'll see you in this same room. Okay, again, we have a tentative schedule of 2 o'clock tomorrow. I can't tell you exactly which room, but we'll get that information to you. And we'll be having a hearing only on House Bill 902 and potentially taking a look at the House Substitute 676, again, at the same time. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, committee. Good questions.